commission of crime and abuse, and that in the subways of New York, similar to what had occurred here in Skid Row, there was a problem that was not being addressed adequately, and the police were total failures in the way they were addressing it. But how it was addressed successfully there, and I believe is beginning to be and will continue to be addressed successfully here, is that embodiment of that community policing philosophy, that it requires partnership. Partnership to, in sometimes use medical comparisons, that I liken what we deal with in policing to a doctor dealing with cancer. It's various forms of cancer. There's the melanoma in the skin, which is an indication there might be something more serious underneath. And so basically what we want to try to do is get it while it's small, because before it becomes full-blown. But so often when it becomes full-blown, the treatment is oftentimes so severe that it is not without risk. It's effectively with chemotherapy and radiation, where injecting poison into the body that if not carefully modulated can in fact ultimately kill or destroy healthy cells. Similarly, with us dealing with the cancer of the issues of crime, disorder, all the issues that we find in Skid Row and subways in New York, that we find in other neighborhoods that might not be generated so much by issues related to homeless population, but other elements, whether it's the gangs or many other things that we focus our attention on. But the idea is that sometimes the condition has gotten so bad that it requires a medicine that we have to continually balance to ensure that we're not effectively poisoning the patient. And in my world, the policing world, that balance is to ensure that whatever our efforts are, that they are constitutional. That whatever our efforts are, they are compassionate, to the best of our ability. And thirdly, that they are consistent. That we're not doing it differently. We may be doing it differently in terms of intensity in an area, because the problem is so intense, but that throughout the city, through all law enforcement overall, that is the driving element. So as we have begun to go at the problem, and I think for the first time successfully, and I do believe we're going at it from a law enforcement perspective successfully, we are in fact identifying other issues. And we discussed some of those this morning, and I think based on some conversations I've had here, no surprise, that there is a recognition that there's only so much that the police can do. We can do a lot, we count. And so often, and I believe this is the case, in cities of decay, areas of city of decay, that we are the most critical element, that we are the catalyst, we are the flashpoint. And I have really come to believe that even over history, even though we're in a flashpoint of so many negative incidents, whether it's the 2 sets of riots here in Los Angeles or elsewhere, we, if properly led, properly focused, properly partnered up, can in fact just the opposite flashpoint, the flashpoint on the cutting edge of success. And I really do believe in our combined efforts to deal with the issues in Skid Row, that the actions of the police have been a significant flashpoint to eventually get us to what I hope will be a tipping point. I think we have arrived at a tipping point as it relates to levels of crime and disorder, in the sense that it is now seen as getting better. Versus recently as 2 years ago, it seems just getting worse and worse as possible. However, we are at a point in time, as you get at any tipping point, where the medicine needs to be modified. That in dealing with a cancer patient, you don't just keep pumping radiation and chemotherapy into that person, because you'll eventually either kill them or you will not have the desired effect. Similarly with our policing efforts, similar to the experience in New York City in the subways and then ultimately in the streets, I still think there is more room for tipping in terms of our efforts, and we are committed to keeping our police resources in that area. We are committed to working in increasingly creating partnerships with our law enforcement criminal justice system. But my perspective on Skid Row at this juncture is what is missing after all of our efforts over the past couple of years are new forms of medicine that are going to allow us to effectively begin to use the police in other ways, in other capacities, And one of the things we've been able to accomplish is that this is what a doctor seeks to do. What is the extent of the problem? What is the extent of the medicine I need to apply to that issue? And so to that end, when we began about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we had a population on the streets, based on our counts, it was 1,750, 1,800. We hit population counts relative to the homeless in the tens of thousands. But as we know, they're not all in Skid Row, they're not all within that 50-block area. And the issue of concern in Skid Row is, in fact, for the police, those on the street who are either engaging in behavior that is not appropriate, authorized, or illegal, and those who may be engaging in behavior against them that is criminal, illegal, or inappropriate. We also have a multiplicity of clients in that area. Because the obligation is not just to serve one and neglect the other. So the other clients we have, in many respects, as many of you in this room, whether it's the biz, whether it's the business owners, whether it's the various entities that are seeking to help the homeless, that we have to be, as police, in some respects, all things to all people, all at the same time. And it's a very difficult balancing act. I'm always reminded of the old last act of the Ed Sullivan shows, where that jugglers out there trying to keep all those plates going in the air at the same time, hoping that one doesn't fall and break. Because if one does fall and break, then basically the impression changes. So in our instance, we have attempted to be responsive to, in terms of intake, from all the various clients that we serve, to try to find that balance within those three areas of consistency, compassion, and constitutionality, that we don't effectively kill the patient or the patients, individuals, whether it's the business owners or those in the streets. But in our efforts, we've been able to reduce that population on the street. The question is, where have some of them gone? Some have clearly gone to jail, and quite frankly, because a lot of those who were on those streets were the predators. They were down there to prey on the others. We made a lot of arrests of them, and they're gone. Others might not have been down there as predators, but their continued use and abuse of drugs and other actions basically caused their revocation of parole probation. So some of those have, in fact, been returned into the criminal justice system. Many others, based on the analysis by my personnel, were those that were kind of the hangers-on. But it was a place you get drugs, you go down party, you go down and lives that most of us in this room would want to be engaged in, but there are many that would want to be in that environment where anything was allowed to go on. A lot of those people have, in fact, left because they have been controls put in place. We really don't know for certain, in terms of those thousands who were not there, where specifically they all went. A lot of it's anecdotal, a lot of it's conjecture. But we do know they're gone. Because month after month, we're down about that hardcore 750. The good news is the additional medicines that I talked about can now be applied. So for example, Project 50, try to take those 50 who are the most significant service leaders, go to the hospital the most often, arrested by us the most often, and just consume millions upon millions of dollars of services, that to try and get them into a new form of housing environment. Because many are resistant to some of the existing forms, whether it's SROs or the shelters that are down there, the missions, etc. The new environment, the new model, if you will, is intended to serve as an inducement to get many of these people off the street, model somewhat after some of the New York experiences and experiments and some of the stuff on the label. So we are at a point in time where, like a doctor, we have now, I think, identified what is the source of all those melanomas, that core problem in that 50-block area. Now the challenge is for the rest of society to step up and partner up with the police, some of the other entities that have been down there, the shelter providers, the bids, the other clients. And I think the one thing that is still missing, on a person's perspective, in terms of those partnerships, is in fact the real ability to deliver that housing issue. We talk about the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been allocated for it. We talk about all the grandiose plans and schemes, but with the exception of that Project 50, a lot of it's not come to fruition. The shelter for the homeless families out in the valley finally began to happen.